What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am back with another video. Wow, there's been some news, some exciting news and some sad news going around in the sport of boxing within the last couple of days. First and foremost, or the I guess you could say the oldest news is the fact that WBO interim light heavyweight champion Callum Smith has withdrawn from his title defense against another top light heavyweight and David Morrell due to a injury that took place during training camp. So it's a bummer that we are no longer gonna be getting, or I don't want to say no longer, but the fact that we were expecting to get within the next couple of weeks, it's no longer taking place due to the injury. It happens, fighters get injured during training camp. It's not the first time, and definitely not the first fighter to experience this. Sebastian Fundora, he ended up getting injured during training camp, and the Keith Thurman fight ended up being postponed. So, like I said, it's a bummer that Callum Smith and David Morrell are not gonna be fighting at the scheduled date. Hopefully, we get a new date soon, because I do believe it's gonna be a really good fight once it takes place, and I wouldn't mind seeing the winner get a crack at a world title, whether it's against Bivol. I know that Bivol is now returning. He's returning. He's got a return date and an opponent. It's already done deal. It's already set in stone, and I wouldn't mind seeing the winner between Callum Smith and David Morrell get a shot at a world title, whether it's against Bivol or maybe against the winner between Bivol and Benavides for undisputed. So that's one of the topics that I wanted to touch today. Like I said, it's unfortunate that Callum Smith and David Morrell, the fight is being canceled or being placed on a hold, due to the injury that Callum Smith suffered. I don't know the exact details. I'll reach out. I'll reach out to Buddy McGurr, and Buddy McGurr is currently the trainer of Callum Smith. So I'll reach out to him, see if I can get a bit of information, or a little bit of, I guess you could say, personal details behind the scenes. Buddy McGurr being given the fact that he is the trainer, he is with Callum Smith. I don't want to say 24/7, but for most of the times, besides the strength and conditioning part, Buddy McGurr is the head guy right there. He's the main head when it comes to Callum's training. But now to the exciting news. So just yesterday, it was put out there, and it was shown, it was demonstrated, it was put out there, like I said, that former WO featherweight champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist, Cuban standout Robeisy Ramirez has now left Ismael Salas, and he has linked up with, if I'm not mistaken, three-time trainer of the year, Robert Garcia. That caught a lot of people off guard. I was not expecting a Cuban fighter to go with the Mexican trainer. Styles tend to differentiate quite a lot. Cubans tend to box quite different than most Mexican fighters or current Mexican fighters. If we go back in history when it comes to Mexican boxing, sure, we can take in accountability Finito Lopez, Gilberto Roman, Miguel Canto, of course Salvador Sanchez. Those fighters, in my opinion, that's the original Mexican style. Fighters had footwork, head movement, defense, angles. Of course, if you want to count the Mexican American, Orlando Canizales. So, if you take those fighters out of the equation, and if you want to describe the Mexican style, with using references or examples like Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, Juan Manuel Marquez, Travieso Arce, Chololo Larios, the list goes on and on. You would know, and you would see that the difference is a big margin when it comes to the Cuban style of boxing and the Mexican style of boxing. It tends to be quite different. Cubans are known to be a lot more of movers, whereas Mexican fighters tend to come forward, put pressure, and throw combinations and throw power shots. Be counter punchers like Juan Manuel Marquez. Be aggressive like Barrera and Morales. You know, Cuban fighters, unfortunately, due to their I guess you could say, their system, their social system that they got going on in their country, they face a lot more difficulties than most. I'm gonna say than most people in the world, or maybe one of the countries that faces a lot more difficulties. Due to their, not just with their economy, but a lot of basic needs. I don't want to get into that topic. I'm gonna jump into a totally different topic that has nothing to do with this video, but just having I guess you could say having courtesy for them. You know, for the reasons that they face in Cuba, a lot of fighters, a lot of great, tremendous amateur fighters that are very talented, that have any and everything to be a boxing world champion and a superstar. They're unable to fulfill their full potential due to, like I said, the reasons they got going on, or the issues or the problems that they face in their country. But when a fighter is able to defect, they're they're able to they're able to make a lot of noise in the sport of boxing at times. Sometimes they tend to stay in the amateurs quite too long, and they don't perform to their highest expectations or to their full potential, because, like I said, they tend to stay in the amateurs quite a bit too long. And professional boxing and amateur boxing is very different. Yes, amateur boxing does count. Yes, amateur boxing is important, but getting that professional experience is second to none. You could have perfect example. Just recently, Andy Cruz. He stayed in the amateurs for quite some time, and when he got in there with a tested and experienced professional fighter and Raymond Murataya, you were able to tell the difference and experience that Raymond Murataya possessed over Andy Cruz in professional boxing. Um, Robeisy Ramirez, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, a an amateur standout in Cuban boxing. He was able to defect successfully, and he was able to climb up the ranks, become world champion. But then he faced an unknown Mexican fighter in Rafael Espinosa in a title defense in Florida, and he came up short. Rafael Espinosa surprised a lot of people, including myself, and myself included. I had picked Robeisy Ramirez to come out victorious and to successfully defend his world title. But Rafael Espinosa didn't just come in to get a paycheck. He wasn't there to just show up. He was there to win, and he did exactly that. In the rematch, Rafael Espinosa dominated Robeisy again and was able to stop him before the final bell. Um, Going back to what I said, professional boxing experience and amateur boxing experience are two different things. And Robeisy Ramirez making that change from Ismael Salas to Robert Garcia, like I said, it caught me off guard. Robert Garcia, yes, he is known for training a lot of Hispanic fighters from different countries. I don't recall a fighter's name right now, but at one point he trained a fighter from the Dominican Republic. He has trained Argentine fighters like Marcos Maidan, of course, Jesus Cuellar. He's had fighters from different nations. Evgeny Gradovic, the Mexican Russian, and of course one of his, I guess you could say, one of the most recent fighters that he and Garcia parted ways a few years ago, but he is now currently the WBC middleweight world champion. Early in his career, he was trained by Robert Garcia, Carlos Adames. So, like I said, Robert Garcia is known for working with a lot of Hispanic fighters, generally Mexicans or Mexican American. Every now and then he'll get a fighter from a different Hispanic country. But Cubans, I'm not sure if Robert Garcia has ever trained any Cuban. Like I said, I know that he's worked with Dominican Republic or Dominican fighters. He's worked with Argentine fighters, and most notably Mexican fighters or Mexican American fighters. It caught me off guard. Robert Garcia is a great trainer. He is known for getting fighters that are maybe towards the end of their career, or maybe have already a few losses on the record, and they're able to bounce back most of the time. So I can think of a few right now. Maidana, he was coming off a loss against Devin Alexander. Already had, if I'm not mistaken, two losses besides the Devin Alexander defeat. Went to Robert Garcia, got a few victories, beat Adrian Broner in an upset, and secured two big fights against Floyd Mayweather. Abner Mares, of course. Abner Mares had already lost to Leo Santa Cruz in the first fight. He had been knocked out by Johnny Gonzalez. A lot of people wrote him off, and I guess I could say, including myself. I didn't think much of Abner Mares after he lost to Leo Santa Cruz. He went to Robert Garcia, defeated Jesus Cuellar, who Jesus Cuellar had left Garcia for Freddie Roach. Under Robert Garcia, Cuellar won the WBA featherweight world title. Now Abner Mares was facing Cuellar, Abner being the challenger with Garcia in his corner, and Abner was crowned world champion once again. So, like I said, there's been many scenarios where fighters tend to go to Robert Garcia, fighters who are maybe towards the end of their career, or maybe don't have maybe not in their prime anymore, but they still have a little bit of They still have a little bit of juice left in them. They still have maybe the last few miles in their tank that they're able to, maybe push a little more. And with the great trainer, with the right guidance in their corner, they're able to still do a little more, maybe get nice paydays, or maybe become world champion once again. Robeisy Ramirez, I wish him nothing but the best. I know that he is making the right choice. Recently, I forgot, it just came to my mind right now. Anthony Joshua, coming off the loss against Alexander Usyk, and even though he lost in the rematch, he performed a lot better in the rematch against Usyk with Garcia in his corner. So, man, I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see what Robert Garcia is able to do with Robeisy. I would love to see that duo. Let's see what happens with the new voice in Robeisy's corner. Let's see how Robeizy is able to develop. I know Robeizy is gonna get great sparring in Robert Garcia's gym. Robert Garcia has a handful of fighters. Who knows how many fighters he has, but he has a lot of young and up and coming fighters. I just remember right now Anthony Cuba. Anthony Cuba is a Cuban fighter, or of Cuban heritage, or Cuban descent. He is trained by Robert Garcia, so I know that Robeisy is gonna get a lot of great sparring and a lot of great work at Garcia's gym. And man, given the fact that Robert Garcia is from the same hometown as I am, it always makes me happy. Seeing hometown heroes develop and be successful at anything they do, and involving the sport that I like and that I follow, man, it just makes me even happier. So, man, like I said, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how far Robeisy is able to bounce back, and I'm excited to see how far Robert Garcia can take him. All right, guys, that was it for this video. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.